Welcome to the Harbour Tech Academy. Today we're actually going to talk about sandwich station setup and how we can actually organise ourselves in an efficient way to make beautiful sandwiches on a production line in a commercial kitchen. Let's go. So today we're actually going to learn about the equipment that you'll need for sandwich making to make it efficient. We'll also be looking at the station setup and a suggested setup that works really well in most commercial kitchens. And finally, we're going to have a look at efficient sandwich workflows so that we can do it cleanly and safely and make it look amazing. All right, let's get straight into it. General equipment for sandwiches. First of all, we need cutting boards, predominantly green, but you might use a brown cutting board for slicing cooked meat that you use for the filling. With knives, you'll need a serrated edge knife, you'll need a cook's knife, you'll probably need a paring knife, and also a palette knife for spreading occasionally. Then we use tongs to keep it nice and hygienic, and you'd wear gloves. A sandwich guard, and if you've not seen the sandwich guard, you're actually cutting the sandwich across by placing that on top. Next, egg slice, very handy tool to have in a sandwich, and this is the important one here, the gastronome trays to actually keep all of our ingredients separate, and that will always go on an ice bucket. You start with beautiful ingredients, but to actually maintain the freshness of those ingredients, we need equipment. So the cling wrap or plastic wrap is a very important one to keep our sandwiches from going dry. Paper bags are actually a good way of placing sandwiches in there. The resealable plastic bags for maybe fillings that you're going to have there. Sealed plastic containers are also really important to make sure that we keep the freshness in and we put it in the fridge. Greaseproof paper also, when you're actually lining trays and trays of sandwiches, was very helpful. And finally, very importantly, the day stamps to actually say when you've actually put the sandwiches in so that we can maintain freshness and also that food safety regime. So in the last mix, we actually looked at hot sandwiches. So let's have a look at the heating equipment. Industrial toasters are a mainstay in any good commercial kitchen, as well as the salamander for actually toasting. Flat grills, awesome for cooking meat that's going to go on sandwiches, toasted sandwiches, a whole range of things. And the industrial sandwich press is indispensable in a commercial kitchen for making really yummy sandwiches. It's so important to be well organized so that you can complete your work within the allowed time frame and service. So to achieve that efficient workflow, here's a way of setting up your sandwich station which I think will work really well. First of all, we have all of our different fillings, which these would be sitting in gastronomes and separate. And also another little tip is actually having a packet and then about 4 or 5 wrapped in your fridge so you can replace them, and they would sit in an ice bath. Next, we're looking at the different types of spread, and we've talked about that with butter, margarine, maybe even dips. Then you're actually a basket with all of the different types of bread that you might need. Then a tray with those types of knives, tongs, all of the equipment that you'll actually need. Cutting boards, and as discussed before, you may need a couple of different cutting boards. Once you've finished, you'd have an area where you'd place them briefly and have the plates ready to actually serve to the customers as soon as possible. Efficient workflow is so very important to good quality sandwiches. Step 1, you'd be setting up your workstation. Step 2, then completing all of your mise en place, getting the spreads ready, getting all of your fillings ready, then placing the bread on the chopping board. What's next? We're going to spread it with butter. Make sure that it's nice and even across the whole thing. Then place and layer our major fillings into the sandwiches. Then place the top bread, position the sandwich guard over the top to cut it really precisely. Then it's actually going to go into the gastronome trays ready for service. Who would have thought there were so many different techniques for using sandwiches in a commercial kitchen? And yes, there's more. So let's go. Some other techniques you can use, piping, sort of different butters and spreading. We also layer, which is a really important skill when we're doing sandwiches. The precise cutting, not squashing our sandwiches, the garnishing, which I'm going to talk about. Portion size is so very important for visual appeal. And finally, I'm going to talk about molding. Molding? You'll see. This is where the yumminess starts to appear. I've got this beautiful picture here of an open sandwich. Now, piping, you would actually use a piping bag. You can see here there's some sour cream piped on there, a little bit of roe, some prawns and salmon. Very, very yummy. Also, remember when we're spreading, we want an even cover across the whole bread. Next technique, so we're going to talk about our layering and cutting. You think, does it really matter? But when it actually comes to it, the way that you slice your meat and your vegetables and the way you layer it gives it visual appeal, and when cutting it also gives you beautiful flavors. And look at that, I'm hungry already. We're going to touch on garnishing, but the next mix will actually take you through more of that. Contemporary ways of presenting now, the high tea has become very, very popular. So little finger or Pullman sandwiches actually set up for visual appeal, and it's very much about the shape. Next photo here, we have some wraps. So we're using different colored wraps. We've got some condiments in the middle, some lettuce, and different colored cherry tomatoes to give visual appeal. This one here, open sandwiches. We've got the contrast of the red, the green, and also the bocconcini, and also the different textures. It's a really lovely way of presenting sandwiches. Next, we're going to talk about portioning and molding. Remembering that we're in a commercial kitchen, that having the right portion size gives us the profit margin that we need to actually run a restaurant. It also gives visual appeal and also a consistency. So making sure that every sandwich is about the same size. We also need to look at molding, which is an interesting one. You can actually mold different shaped sandwiches with fillings in there. I showed love hearts before. It's not something that you see a lot, but we need to talk about it. At this point, you're saying, I can't believe there are so many different things to think about when we're making sandwiches in a commercial kitchen. It is very much about practice, and remember, making beautiful sandwiches is a real art form. I love it, and I want to see some beautiful ones from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time at the Harbour Tech Academy.